So they're too hard to pass.
This is not the same number that 2020 amended.
Did you touch that, or do I need to do that? Okay.
Unable to join meeting. Should be this one right here, right? 10:30. Carter Farm. Okay. Now it's now. There we go.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, August 5th. All three commissioners are here in the commissioners' meeting room. Monica Reeves is doing the deputy clerk duties for us. Tricia Nielsen is at the desk. She is the director of the DSD department of Canyon County. This is a public hearing. Consider a request by Karcher Farm LLC and SS Karcher LLC for a comprehensive plan map amendment and conditional rezone, and those case numbers are OR 2018-0004 and CR 2018-0002. And it's just an update for this public hearing today. At our last meeting, Commissioner Dale, and it was seconded by Commissioner Van Beek, the board voted unanimously to close public comment. And there was discussion about the additional time that the exhibits that we had gotten and the information. And so the motion by Commissioner Dale and seconded by Commissioner Van Beek, the board voted unanimously to continue the hearing to July 23rd to continue deliberation, and that one was over. So then we had the same situation. We continued and we closed public testimony, but we are meeting for deliberation for a decision today. And so we're not going to take public testimony because that has been closed, but we are going to give our deliberations. Okay? So there has been a lot of information, a lot of exhibits came through. Jennifer Almeida, are you on the line?
Madam Chair, yes, I am.
Yes. Okay. Did you have anything you wanted to say?
I was just going to go over the previous hearings, which, Madam Chair, you just conducted the summary of the same information I was going to present in regards to the purpose of this meeting today is for the deliberation and or decision regarding this case. I do have the criteria for a comprehensive plan map amendment and rezone, conditional rezone on the slides, and I can pull those up as you're working through the deliberation. With that, I have nothing further to add if you have any questions for me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Van Beek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know this has been an ongoing project, and the significance of this project is important to both the developer, the board, and the citizenry that are out there in that area. I did not dislike the presentation on the part of Valleywide for a commercial. I did visit with our development services director yesterday and got clarification on the comprehensive plan for this area before this request came forward. And so it's my understanding, Trish, and maybe you can help me, this area had a commercial designation on the comprehensive plan at the time that Mr. Palfrey bought this property. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
Jennifer can bring the map.
Okay. And yes, I would like to see that. And the amount of the commercial designation at that time was around 90 acres. Is that right?
Is that right, Jennifer?
Yeah, let me grab that file. It'll take just a moment to upload it. So bear with me just a moment. I'll get that pulled up for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. In the meantime, I'd like to comment that the difference in this application, there's been a request to remove a portion of that commercial designation, convert that from commercial to residential, and then just retain 30 acres for development, 10 of which has been sold. So is this the first, this was the first one with the red and commercial that's been teared down, is that right? Or is this what's represented out front in red?
Commissioner Van Beek, the exhibit that's up on the screen is the future land use map. The red areas were areas designated as commercial on the future land use map, which shows that the Valleywide property was designated as future commercial on the future land use map.
Thank you for that. And does this red area for that represent 90 acres or the 30 acres on the new proposal? That makes sense?
Yes, can you repeat that? I was having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, and I don't know why I'm having trouble. In the original application that was submitted by Mr. Paul Ferman and represented by Mr. Lacey, there was 90 acres of designated commercial in the comprehensive plan. And they came back and pared that down to 30 acres with the conversion of portions of 60 acres to residential. I think I'm getting those numbers right, but can you help me? I'm wondering on this map, does this reflect the first application? Because we didn't have an updated staff report for this new one, so we're working on a 2-year-old staff report. This 90 acres is this 30 acres?
So the map on the screen is just simply reflecting what the future land use map shows for this area. The applicant, as part of this application, was requesting to change the designation of 44.9 acres from commercial to residential. Excuse me, I'm sorry, from agricultural to residential. And then the rezoning portion of this request is to rezone 36.8 acres to commercial and 90.8 acres to residential.
Okay, so the total amount of commercial on this will be the 36.8.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that. And so to date, Madam Chair, we only know what 1/3 of the commercial portion will look like. So that's what we have to do if we're going to overcome the recommendation of denial, is to prove up why it's better in those conditions to go with that, and the impact of an additional 20 acres of commercial, unless there's additional buyers on that, that would have a significant impact on traffic and water. The other thing that I would say that's significant on this, there was an inability to move forward from DEQ because there was, I guess, some hesitation or opposition to a centralized wastewater and drinking water system, which would protect Lake Lowell. So yesterday we heard a decision where the developer was willing to put in a centralized sewer treatment center that would eventually tie into services. That was not next to a natural resource and something that the county wants to protect. And so I am trying to figure out, and perhaps you know, is that something that if we look at overcoming those obstacles, those appear, the density, there's no growth. The traffic issues, we had a developer that was willing to provide mitigation in turn lanes and different things before, and I think that looks better to the public if that's tackled on the front end and the back end. I see merit in both of them, but without concessions on how to get there, then I don't feel we would be able to overcome what they want to do, even though I don't dislike the project.
Jennifer? Whoops, you're muted. There. That stretch of 55, what is there the storage units? Are they across the road?
There are storage units on an adjacent property, and that would be to the east of the subject property on the other side of Farmway.
Okay. Okay, is there do we know what the speed limit is through there?
I think it's 55.
Is it 55? That's a 55, the highway right there goes through there at 55?
Yeah.
Yes, Madam Chair, that is my recollection that it is 55 in that area of Karcher.
Right.
That's right.
Yes.
I also have a question for Trish. On Farmway Road headed south toward Orchard, there's an LDS church and neighboring properties that abut that. And there's also a prescriptive right-of-way for that. And that road is 24 feet wide. And it's a minor arterial, is how it puts it. So I think there's some concern because of the traffic and the heavy traffic on there. Can you refresh my memory on what's prescriptive right-of-way? Do they need more?
I guess I haven't looked to the Canyon Highway District letter. I'm not familiar with prescriptive right away. I know that you're looking for dedication. Jennifer can bring it back exhibit. But they do a good job of describing the current condition of the roadway and right of way, and they would want exacted from future development, typically at a platting stage. And but there are platted subdivisions along of Jennifer.
I am pulling up the staff report while you are discussing. Canyon Highway District does have a couple of letters submitted for the record. Exhibit 47 was submitted in regards to this request. And also Exhibit 19. 19 might be the place to start. I believe 47 was more in regards to traffic impact studies. So let me get those pulled up for you.
And then can you talk a little bit in a minute? It was conflicting information. They had a traffic impact study where ICD did not recommend certain things at an intersection that was problematic against traffic reports, but the Nampa Highway District then came in and said, we've identified this as an overload. So what assurances can be provided that if a traffic impact study doesn't recommend certain things to mitigate that, that was clearly in conflict, and so I'm trying to get at, there's already a traffic concern out there. And how, on the back end as a citizen, you look at that and say, another report, another waiting line, another traffic overload. So,
to speak to maybe the progression of the analysis and then subsequent improvement to roadways when there's I'll just say a concern. Usually the agencies have a prioritization of where we want to focus improvement, and then as development occurs, it's not in their current funding plan, then the exactions that they need to, that they feel are necessary to handle that traffic load. Sessions at that time and maybe things in the future. This is all, it rarely comes together and the road is exactly what it's usually an evolution over time of improvements in capacity. So in this case, we have a newly improved Farmway Highway 55. In geologic terms of transportation, that was within probably 5 years. That's really good investment. So the Highway District, working with ITD, they did the analysis to size that intersection, knowing in the future then the subsequent feeder roads to Farmway would be widened to match up how they designed that intersection. So I'll speak to maybe the Farmway South. So they'll look at what is the future capacity needed for that. I'll focus on the southern segment of Farmway. That's where I think traffic issues are down. That's where Jennifer has the letter up. What right-of-way will they need? They kind of know how many lanes of road they need, but they can't always get that from development. They have to look at either buying it, the development's already happened, what's the opportunity of future development then to contribute that right-of-way to over time, create the road that's needed. So in the meantime, typically then there's the operational improvements to make sure, obviously safety is the #1 priority, and then operational issues of like matching up intersections on Farmway to the ones across the street. In this particular, they have a technical design manual but that's typically done at the time of platting.
Right.
And I think in this case, so they did a traffic study, but until the type of commercial is known, they won't be able to really dial in the traffic generation because that can vary depending, obviously self-storage, very low. Commercial retail, very high, restaurants, things like that, do generate a lot of traffic. And, whereas the residential, single family is well known. So that, so I think the unknown at this time is not so much from the residential, but it's really from the commercial. But more importantly, probably, and I think they addressed it in their letter, is what is the internal circulation plan? Working with ITD, they have access controls on state highways. The highway district has access controls on farmways. And so it's internal circulation, particularly with splitting off for on the corner there, how does that fit in? How is that property going to get access? And so then you look at how is the traffic generated from the land use actually going to get to what roads, and how is that whole network going to work? And so that's where the TIS looks at that. And I don't know that we have, I think there's obviously assumptions in the initial one, but I would think as commercial uses come in, that's something both ITD and the highway district will coordinate who's going to require the traffic studies. So they both have to coordinate then how are their respective systems impacted, knowing more information about traffic. So that's what I think, and Jennifer, in their comments, if you want to scroll down, they tend to qualify, especially for a rezone. It's really when we get to the plat, we get to rezone.
Right.
So we're trying to get
I can read that for you.
the TIS.
Right,
Yeah.
Well, and down here at the end of it, it says a traffic impact study is required to evaluate these impacts and determine access locations, local connectivity, traffic impacts to nearby corridors and intersections should be prepared in conjunction with Canyon Highway 4 and ITD and should be completed prior to submittal of a preliminary plat for any portion of the development. And that's what will happen.
So
those will be determined.
39 is the traffic study.
Yeah.
Right.
This is their initial.
And I would make the comment, we're talking about the commercial area up there, reducing from 90 acres down to approximately 30. There's going to be significantly less impact with the 30 acres as far as traffic goes, commercial, as opposed to 90 acres, I would think, just logically. Yeah.
It depends on the type of commercial.
Sure, it depends on the type of commercial, but you look at that location and there's pretty, you know, there's a limitation on what type of commercial would actually work there as far as a business model. And so I think we're not going to see a incredibly high volume shopping center or something like that. You're not going to see that. But.
Now, I sensed at the last public hearing, and we took plenty of comments from, there were a lot of people WebExed in and that sort of a thing. And a very strong point was made that if we wait and let Caldwell annex this, it would be high density. And where right now it is development agreement conditioned to a 1.25 acre. And so it's a nice, that's a nice size for the area and everything. And I sense, now you other two commissioners, but I kind of got the feeling that the citizens that were opposed were more inclined to be okay with 1.25 acre homes rather than the high density from Caldwell, if it was annexed into Caldwell. I sensed that. But at the same time, they still had the opposition was to the commercial, because the commercial was going to add a traffic problem and that sort of thing. So is there the possibility, Tricia, that the commercial there, like the one that was discussed or one that was talked about in the last hearing, I can't remember what it was. What is it?
Valley-wide.
Not like
Valley-wide, okay. Okay. Wouldn't that would have a turn lane, so that would be a traffic calmer. Wouldn't that be?
Sure. You're talking about on farmland?
No, I'm talking about the commercial that's on the front of the property. So if they have to, it would require, I would think that if they have that ITD would require a turn lane.
And Chair, the access to that property is unknown at this time. They have not completed the administrative land decision process.
Okay, okay.
Negotiating that with Canyon Highway District on an access or some kind of easement. I don't, Jennifer and I talked about it, it's still not done.
Okay.
So I can't really speak to, because I don't even know where the
Well,
access to, I would just presume that ITD would not allow an access to the state highway. And an access on Farmway would have to at least meet, or they'd have to get a variance on the distance from the state highway. And that's a pretty significant distance, spacing
Okay.
of
So-
those approaches. But they typically, that is all before they submit, before they get an approach permit, they have to be of one mind, the property owner. They won't get an approach permit until they meet those agency standards. So,
I guess then what I just am leading to, because this is deliberations and just
Yeah.
questions that I've had, if we restricted it to just residential and we took the commercial out, is that a deal breaker for the,
are you talking about the rezone versus the comp plan and the?
yes, if we restrict it, even though the frontage part of it there is on the comp plan
Yeah,
as commercial.
correct.
But if that was very problematic. So I'm just talking
Yeah.
what's been going through my mind.
Gotcha.
So I'm not done. So and I'll forget, if we restricted it to residential and took out the commercial, they would still have to do a comp plan amendment. Is that true? Because that is as commercial there, but I want to find out if that is if that is a deal breaker on the development of these 1.25 acre
So can I
home
summarize,
lots.
make sure I'm in the context of the application? So are you, let's say suggesting, the comp plan amendment to add the residential, that would be necessary to then get to a rezone where you would just, maybe approve the residential rezone, but maybe not the commercial rezone at this time.
At this time.
And they could come back maybe with more detail. I'm not, is that, am I?
That's what I'm restricting
I'm just trying to
restricting
verbalize it in the
that.
context of a decision.
But at the same time, you know, you have to be sensitive to both sides, and you have to be sensitive to the landowners because property rights and all of that.
Right.
And you got to be sensitive to, this has been going on for 2 years or so, and so you have to be sensitive to it. That is if there's interest and there's money involved and stuff like that, that is a ching, ching, ching every day thing. So I want to know if it's a deal breaker.
Just
To
like the other
eliminate-
option, since this is a conditional rezone, you feel that there could be conditions on the commercial development or benchmarked before they could proceed to getting a building permit or plating.
Okay,
So that, I just want to say that
Madam Chair.
you have that option open to you as well.
okay.
And intuitively, I like where you're going, Trish, that if we look at how to overcome the things that are laid out that don't support, that we would try to find ways to mitigate and help pacify at least the needs of the people that have purchased the property and what's already on the county's comprehensive plan,
Right.
and then help alleviate some of the fears or concerns on the other side. So I guess I'll just jump to where I might like to go. I'm going to ask the first question. What I hear you saying is that the chances of having access directly off of Highway 55 are probably small, given the commercial development. So that's going to be off of Farmway then, to that property, is that right?
Yeah, that was, they still have an ability to work with IT.
Okay,
So, I mean, there's
Yeah,
still,
you can't say that.
but it's a lot of extra process. I just want to say, it's just not, oh, we can go get it. There's going to be a lot of,
And I'm just trying to figure out what you are and aren't saying.
Yeah.
So I don't want to put anything in there that's not what you,
right.
is what you didn't say. So you're saying that process for access is yet to be developed?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And so on that, I'm going to jump to things that seem like some of the lower hanging fruit. Was there any, Mr. Lakey, I don't think you can comment, but if we were to look at only addressing that sewer component, because commercial will depend as a bigger obstacle than the residential portion of that. So if you had a treatment system like what was presented yesterday, can you talk about that and what that would look like?
Well, I guess I want to summarize some of the, and Jennifer can help fill in, my recollection is, let me just speak to the residential, that we had a lot of letters, and I believe they came to the hearing from the health district, that actually, I think they thought that the individual well and septic were fine. And there was a lot of discussion that they did not feel it was gonna negatively affect the lake. So I just wanted to kind of put that, are we just focused on the commercial? Because the residential, there was enough evidence in the record from the health district that what was proposed would be okay. It didn't require any mitigation or DQ. So, but the commercial, again, not knowing the type of commercial, just like traffic, what is the nature or intensity of its need for sewage treatment?
Sure.
And without a specific land use, like, that self-storage is pretty low, restaurant or commercial, pretty high at the other end. Since we don't know that, is it a matter of what do we need to know when we need to know it? And are we knowing that that would be on the applicant, that city services would not be available? And let that, either put a condition of development agreement or, well, I don't know that there's anything in the record of any other studies to be done for that, but then they would just have to, like any other use to be developed, would have to get that approval
Right.
from the health district.
And Madam Chair, if I can get a word in,
Yeah.
sneak a word in here. I would just say, generally speaking, you're looking at, I think 10 acres has already been designated for the, what's it called?
Valleyway.
Valleywide. I keep wanting to say Interwest, but that's a bus company. For Valleywide, and I get that because Valley Regional Transit, anyway, that's off the subject. But generally speaking, if you're looking at these 10 acres and you wanted to put those in houses, you'd have potentially 9 individual septic systems and all that kind of stuff and 9 wells. So one commercial enterprise on this 10 acres as opposed to 9 residential is going to have far less impact on the septic needs and the water needs as well. So that, to me, the commercial question here is what's most appropriate on this highway. I would not want to own a house that backs up to that highway, and I think very few people would. That's not a really good place for residential. And as far as the access, you look at the Legacy down south on Highway 45. They did get an access. There's an access off of that highway to get into that Legacy feed
Yeah, that
store.
was an existing access.
It was an existing access, but it's down the road a ways.
Yeah.
But it is an access off that highway to access that commercial area. And there's two or three commercial enterprises right there. And I can see that same thing happening here, but there is a process. There's no guarantee, but there is a process, and they have a lot in other places with similar types of activities. So.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hill, and I was out in this area, and I like the Valleywide proposal because the Chevron Shell station, whatever it is that's out there, it looks like an older facility, and a lot of those newer convenience fueling things, depending on size and capacity, like Legacy, they're very attractive. And you have that fruit stand, which does it just ease the business. The difference between that access, though, and what's out on 12th Avenue. 12th Avenue is flat and straight, and Riverside Road, I think it's Riverside that's right there to the west, has a hill, so it's a little bit difficult on the traffic side. So what I want to do as a commissioner, because I know, again, you have two, you have a developer represented here with a project that does not appear, it appears to be a good project, but how to overcome? I asked for an updated staff report because I was wondering if there was any movement on the planning, the Compass portion of that. And I asked Jennifer, and the answer is no. So it's not forecast in that area for projected growth. However, in the Moonstruck West, all of those, It's beautiful, it looks nice, it's desirable. I don't know what the vacancy rate is, but I think it's pretty darn low. Those houses, they're on the market, they get sold. They're not cheap. So even though that population isn't forecast, there is growth happening in that area that people find desirable. The thing that becomes problematic on the agricultural side of that is that this piece that borders Farmway and 55, it's straight, it's not cut out the middle, right? So you've got that piece, and then you have another piece of agricultural ground to the west of that, correct? Yes.
Jennifer, can you bring the aerial back up, please?
So you've got property in between the fruit stand and Mr. Palterman's property that's still agricultural. And maybe not. So Jennifer, can you use your marker and point out Lakeside for Lakeview fruit stand?
Commissioner Van Beek, are you asking where the fruit stand is?
Yes.
Okay. It is at the intersection of Riverside and Karcher, which I
And
believe
this looks
would be
like
right there.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. So,
Yep.
It's quite a ways away. Yeah.
and this all in orange is what the proposal. So there would be no additional. I was thinking there would be a piece of farm ground that would basically be enclaved in there, but that whole piece is the one.
Right.
Okay.
And really, if you look at it, this section, if you can, I don't know if you have that ability, Jennifer, but if you pull out farther on an aerial type of a map, you'll see that really this piece of farm ground is enclaved by residential. It really is. It's surrounded totally, and that makes it more acceptable in my mind for this type of a development. That kind of shows it, but it doesn't really.
And I appreciate
show
what you're saying, Commissioner Gill, because
Yeah, it doesn't really show the topography or the aerial.
we looked at that.
We can get back to that.
That off 55, and you took that, like let's say that we allowed that as zoning change to commercial and residential, that would eliminate the movement of heavy equipment to the south side of 55.
Pretty much.
And put that as consistent land use that is still pretty heavily farmed by people that we know on the north side of 55.
Right, right. It would limit. The other thing, one of the concerns was brought up was the speed of traffic on Farmway, and again, that is a Canyon Highway District function to determine what is the appropriate speed out there. And as you develop this, I would anticipate that there would be the opportunity for Canyon Highway to look at that speed limit, probably lower it from what it is today. You're putting more cars out there, and that's not a real difficult thing to do, particularly if the residents request it. I've gone through some of those in the city of Nampa, and you just do a study out there on what the appropriate speed is and change the signs. And I would think that Canyon Highway would be very interested in doing that. So that would address that speed limit along there as well, which would make it safer.
Or did you finish in the midst of that discussion the concept for the commercial portion out there that there's 30 acres. I'm assuming that this has both C1 and C2 designations, or
You forgot the zoning map that's been requested, I guess.
so I would want to make sure, and I don't know how to do that because we zoned it a certain way. We would want to build capacity if it was scheduled for higher density commercial traffic, that we had a way to protect a natural resource like Lowell and make sure that we didn't, I don't know.
I guess it's one.
Commissioner Van Beek, I'm looking for a map to assist you through your deliberations. So we'll go to their site plan that was submitted with the application. Would that be beneficial, Exhibit 3?
Does it have a distinction between C1 and C2?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
We're looking for a designation between, is there C1 and C2 commercial designation in there?
There,
I think C1,
Or is it all C2?
it is C1 and C2.
Okay, and Madam Chair, if I could just comment on that, I hesitate, and I've been pretty consistent over the 6 years I've been here, that when you look at commercial designation and try to get too prescriptive in what can go in there other than what is allowed by the list that we already have, then you really limit that property owner and their ability to market that as far as what's appropriate. And if it's appropriate for C1 and C2, I think that's what the question is. And I personally think this is. I would not want to eliminate that commercial zoning portion from this because you're not, it's clearly in my mind, it's not appropriate for residential along that stretch of highway there. I'm not going to buy a house.
and Commissioner Dale, I don't disagree with you. What I'm trying to do is figure out if there's higher, which we've heard that there potentially could be in that commercial zoning designation, higher traffic, higher use of septic and things, that we find a way to overcome what's listed in there, because the report that I have here says the EQ recommends the project be serviced by existing approved wastewater collection systems. So if we can get to a way, because we don't know what's supposed to be there. So that's the unknown, that's the variable. When you move back to algebra, we don't know what that is. And so if we plan for and allow, we don't restrict the use, but we plan for something that protects the natural resource.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
If we put in a commercial use, if we approve a commercial use that's high traffic kind of a thing, we would want some assurance that the board had taken that into consideration and made allowances for the recommendation, not from the board, but from DEQ, that it be serviced by a wastewater collection system to protect residents and the lake. That's part of our comprehensive plan.
And I would say, you keep going back to that, but I think we determined that was already, we've already determined that we don't need a central collection system here. And depending on, and again, I would just argue that we've already got 30% of this 30 acres designated for the Valleywide project. So that leaves only 70% of the available land for some sort of commercial thing. And I still believe that with 20 some acres of houses, you're going to have a much higher traffic need as well as septic and water need than you would with any kind of commercial that will go in there. I've never seen commercial in this kind of an area require more services than what residential would.
Madam Chair, if I could just follow up. We have a lot of industrial and commercial that are on their own system. You know, they're varying scale for what they need throughout the county. Probably one extreme would be Sirocco out on Highway 19 that has put in a $250,000 treatment plant for its processing. You know, some of the wineries have their own. So in the context of these comments, maybe because of the proximity with Caldwell, we know Caldwell Stewart isn't available for some time, but that the DEQ and the health district review and approval of those larger systems is very robust. There's 2 stages of testing. And again, depending on the land use, kind of the tail will wag the dog to some degree. I mean, you're going to not want to incur that expense, not want to have a use that's going to generate the need for a large, expensive system. And those other systems are, and with the standards today, they can be very environmentally benign. I mean, they're closed, it's a closed system. You have a water balance. You're not, you know, putting wastewater and sending it miles to another watershed. It's all the hydrologic cycle can be maintained, and what's on the site stays on the site, recharges groundwater in a. So I guess I'm not. I know those processes of those agencies are very robust, and the testing that's required is very robust, and that they do not just hand out those permits with that. And that would all be started and have to actually be completed before we are even allowed by our code to issue a building permit. So we've had experiences with folks, and I won't name names, but with the farm worker housing. They did not scope enough time for that wastewater review, and that project didn't happen, sadly. And they were trying to see if we could issue a permit. We said no, and thank goodness we didn't. Our ordinance did not allow it. Because it just wasn't going to happen. And why on earth would the building get ahead of the sewage? So our code prevents that from happening. And that's something that's always been supported by the commission. It's in our ordinance. It's not, I have no discretion as the director to issue a building permit prior to that wastewater permit being authorized by DEQ and or the health district. You know, as far as the commercial goes, if you want us to, Jennifer and I can maybe work on a condition to really button that down. If that's a concern that the building is getting ahead of the wastewater treatment needs for the particular use.
But Trish, you just said that's already a requirement.
Yeah.
So there was no need for anything else.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you putting that on the record, because what we have to do is overcome and satisfy the opposition, and then the things that were listed by planning and zoning. I think they're very good at what they do, and they had a number of things we're trying to provide rebuttal for, which is what we're statutorily charged to do. And then,
Madam Chair, so I guess we're in the deliberation here. I think I wrote down a question here. If I can find it, where was it? I think maybe we've already touched on most of the things that I wanted to talk about here. So go ahead. I'm still looking.
well, so when we look at it under the findings that consideration, we're considering the surrounding land use as a proposed conditional rezone more appropriate than current zoning designation. I'm a really policy person, so part of this is already zoned, so I have to back into this. It's already commercial on the county's comprehensive plan. The applicant has zoned it, pared down the commercial portion of that to about 30 acres. And this, we looked at the map, and there's surrounded by a business and roads in that area. There's a church, storage units, residential. And if we could make the argument that putting this into the proposal that would keep it lower density than city services, and if there, we can prove up that there won't be injury to existing property owners, and Trish is put on the record that proving out those standards for keeping the sewage and the water intact. You know, one of the things they've had to keep bringing it back to is our natural resources, fish and wildlife habitat policy. It's too late once we pollute something to go back and unpollute it. So that's why I was not asking for a residential wastewater, but just looking at the commercial portion. Trish, if I could just recap that. Depending on the applicant, they would have to provide and pass through Southwest District Health to ensure that their business does not impact groundwater and the sewage for that area.
Absolutely. That's state law. You got to do that.
Well, I appreciate that, but there's always arguments that are presented by the opposition that I think it's important that we say that again, because it's our reputation. It's what we're doing as a board. Right. So I say that every time.
Madam Chair, one thing I suggest, I just want to say, when you're dealing with commercial, it's just the options open to you. The commercial, since it's a conditional rezone, and Jennifer can maybe bring up, I'm not sure if we've narrowed the uses in the matrix. I mean, if there are uses allowed in that district that you feel would heighten the probability of that, or conditions, most of the water quality, not all the water quality issues is because of sewage treatment of water. With commercial businesses, you're looking at, we don't have design review standards in the county, but you want to make sure that there's, and the health district gets to some of this, no like outdoor storage of fertilizers or things that aren't weather protected, for example, because that stuff can leach and spread. or hazardous materials. There's obviously a much higher standards for underground fuel tanks. You know, I think we're dealing with cleanup issues of when they weren't good standards. So those have been buttoned down, but it's more the outdoor storage of things that could, in a rain event, could spread. And then obviously how the stormwater is managed. But that will be looked at as well.
Sure.
That's more of a potential risk than, I think, the standards that we have in place for water and sewer. And again, that's kind of use specific, but those could be standards in the development agreement as well, that then we could use when this use payment. We felt those were warranted.
So that they trigger a review based on the applicant coming.
Yeah.
And I want to be careful in this area too, because there's proposals for development that as you go around, turn on Riverside and go down in that Lake Shore area, that is prime ag farm ground. That some of that is just flat at the right time. It's inappropriate. So I want to be careful how we do that as a board and mindful.
Yeah, I appreciate those words,
Yeah.
Commission. And again, it is appropriate to remind folks that state law is there to protect the environment and to protect the water quality and protect all these issues and every land use hearing people who are opposed bring up. Southwest District Health, DEQ, as you say, very robust evaluation standards of all of these kinds of things, particularly commercial. Even in the residential area, there are places where people have to invest considerably more in higher tech septic than other places just because of the ground conditions and the soil conditions in there. And Southwest District Health's on top of that. They take care of that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to note for the record, Exhibit 62 may be helpful. Commissioner Van Beek was asking about the uses. So the land use matrix is Exhibit 62 in your packet.
Thank you. I was looking for that.
Yeah, I was too. I saw it. It is Exhibit 62.
Thank you, Jen. I did have that up, and I can't, you know, if we look at what's on there, we already have them in a banking portfolio, we don't really even know. I just want to make sure that what we approve, if this goes forward, is really embraces our comp plan, orderly development in places where it should go, so it doesn't create conflict, so that it protects natural resources.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and the other part of it is I'm a firm believer that the market takes care of that. We are a free market system, and businesses have to decide. I can't imagine somebody else would go up there and build another storage facility right there. It just wouldn't make business sense. So private enterprise will determine what is appropriate there. They've got to make a profit. They've got to make sure it pays off, and that's the only way that's to handle. I don't believe that's the place. I don't want to make that decision as a government official. That's not my job. My job is to say, here, you can do this. Here's your list. What fits, and let the private sector determine that.
I want to jump to the land use, commercial, and industrial policies to see what we can do to overcome some of the objections. I know we talked about that. What is go to Exhibit 23, because that is it's what we were talking about on access. So it says the applicants are not proposing city or community services. You know that we support the development of Finland and individual systems for commercial and residential. Most property has furniture. However, the multiple access points proposed in the site plan Exhibit 3 are not consistent with Dodge's access policy and are not recommended for approval by Penn Highway District 4, 2019. Idaho Transportation Department objects to the proposed application due to traffic and access concerns. ITD will withdraw any objection to the proposal once the traffic and access concerns have been addressed with the Department Exhibit 23. So in the 2 years that we've had since the staff report has come out, what have we done to address the concerns that have been, because it's a cart and horse thing. We're trying to get one before the other to get something approved. But it looks to me like some of that's going to have to be satisfied with due diligence on the part of the applicant. Because I would hesitate. I don't feel good about approving something with what we've deemed the expert in that, ITD, Canyon Highway District 4. If we aren't able to overcome that with something that is a highlight and comparable for planning and zoning, then how can I do that?
Madam Chair, the access points, and that's similar with the land division process. Anytime you divide land in the county, our ordinance requires that approval, either through the approach permit or for a land division, it's a letter of acknowledgement that has to come in with the application, and they have to meet the transportation agency's requirements before we final that decision. And then the same with a preliminary plat, final plat, and that's where that would provide ITD that certainty of what are the access points. Without a plat, we don't know that yet. So that's really putting the applicant and the county on notice that they're, they have a lot to overcome if they're going to submit a plat that's just an access. It just won't go anywhere, won't get approved. No development will happen unless those access concerns by ITD are met, and the best representation of that is the plat, because that actually divides the property and sell it. If you can't overcome that as a plat, everything stops.
And so, so on Exhibit 3, you've got right out onto Carter, so that's eastbound, and then the access points are clearly off the Farmers Road, Canyon Lake Street and Paul Shaw Court. So when I asked
That's
about
a concept plan,
okay,
versus a plat. Yeah, and so I already said that's not, that would have to be proved up in the plat. That's going to be, I think, very, very difficult based on the agency's comments. So.
And again, they'll figure that out at the appropriate time to make this work. And our job here today is to consider the approval of this so that they can move to that next stage. Without this approval, they don't go to that next stage. And if they do that next stage before the approval, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Yeah. There's process, and the process has been firmly established, and that's what we're doing. We're walking through the step by step.
Commissioner, I appreciate your comments, because what you're doing is refocusing back down what the decision is. The decision is to ask whether or not the conditional rezone, which would give 30 acres of commercial and a portion of the commercial to residential, that's what we're talking about today.
With the comp plan and the REIT.
Right, and so.
And the development agreement is included that too.
Yeah.
Right. The action item is to consider development agreement findings, facts, conclusions of law and order, resolution, and an ordinance. That's all of today's
And
action item.
Jen, I'm looking at Exhibit 1, and I have the conditional rezone. Where's the development agreement portion of this?
The development agreement, Commissioner Van Beek, is Exhibit 78B.
Okay.
This is exhibit, or attachment E on the condition. So near the end of
And so just a recap on this, it complies, it's supposed to comply with the standard. It has a 2-year window to go after approval. It has to be in substantial compliance with the site plan, which is Exhibit 3. And that's a lot of wiggle room for me, so I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, we've got that.
So I want to just kind of, so if I am okay with the 1.25 acres in the proposed housing aspect of this and that is in comparison to what is surrounding it, it is bigger than some and not quite as big, but it is compatible, 1.25 acres for residential. It's compatible. On the commercial aspect, our comp plan calls for that. What I have heard is anything that's proposed to go there, okay, that has been reduced to 1/3 of what was originally presented, because it was like 90 acres or something like that originally presented, and now it's 30. So it's been reduced. 2/3 of it have gone away, and so it's 1/3 of the site. Before anything is approved for that, it has to come back before us. It has to get approval through ITD. All these agencies are going to have to make their approvals on different things like on those types of things, and then it comes before us for plotting and all of that.
The only exception to that, and I can let Jennifer, they have submitted administrative land division to split off, which is just a record of survey. And that requires the approval, the letter of acknowledgement from the highway district, and they don't have that yet.
Okay.
So that, if they do overcome and get to have that, then that would just be a division that would not come back to the board. And then if they had the zoning, then they would be eligible to submit a building permit. You know, they'd have to, and before the building permit, they have to come in the door with the approach permit issued by, and the septic for this.
Okay.
That approval comes in with building permit.
So the agencies do have to, okay.
And Trish, I'm sorry,
And I don't know if that, Jennifer, is that the last division? Does everything else have to be platted after that, Jennifer? Oh, she's muted.
You're muted.
We can't hear you.
Now we
Can
can.
you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
there we go.
So in regards to that, it depends on the history on each of the parcels. So on each original, they could divide up to 4 parcels. Anything beyond that would involve a plat. On this particular parcel that they sold to Valleywide, in the commercial portion of that, they would have another division if they so chose to do that. But again, they are working out the access issues. I did check with Canyon Highway District this morning, and that has not been yet resolved. So we will not issue any findings on that until they do have their approach permit from the Highway District.
From the division, yeah.
Correct.
And what I heard is that they can't get approval from the agency for project is not forward.
If division doesn't happen, yeah.
Correct.
Gotta have access.
That division, tell me, I'm sorry, there's a lot of information. The division portion of that you're talking about, would you
Is
say that again?
the property that during this process, they have sold to another entity.
I think, okay, so it's that,
Right.
okay.
Like, what's in the, I don't know if we have a current assessor map, but it's that, yeah, right, right.
Okay. And so
Over there, the air change.
this exhibit B, there are 4 conditions that have to be met from Canyon Highway District. And the traffic impact study, internal roads, built Highway District 4 standards. So I'm just saying these for the record, even though they're here and available to some people. This is a huge file. Mitigation, storm drainage, the density, the size of the property. I have a question for you. Those properties in Moonstruck are not an acre and a quarter. Those are smaller. They're like a half acre, and not that small. 1 acre. Okay. Okay, and so the extra quarter acre, what might allow them to, the room next to the lake is at 380 feet in proximity on one of that side. So that still would give the lot size, and I'm just talking out loud. And then there's 6 conditions for sanitary sewer and water. So it has to be Southwest District, the commercial zones have to comply with Southwest District and DEQ. Subdivision engineering report approved by DEQ has to be submitted with the preliminary plat, has to meet the requirements of the Department of Environmental Quality, has to meet the requirements of IDWR for domestic water, and commercial flushing development will be permitted on the subject property until such time as the applicant has received and approved for wastewater and domestic water for Southwest District House and Idaho Department of Water Resources for the intended use. So this encompasses commercial too.
Absolutely, yeah. Just to focus this back here a little bit, this development agreement was part of what was previously discussed, I believe, wasn't it? There's really nothing new in the development agreement that's been added, I don't think, right? Is that correct, Trish or Jennifer?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're going through the process here, and Madam Chair, I'd just say I really appreciate the discussion. It's kind of fleshed out a lot more of this stuff here. But I am still supportive of this as I was in the last time we went through this and voted on it. I think we've narrowed down some of the issues that we wanted to. I think, in my mind, we've answered a large part of the objections that people had. There's still going to be a certain amount of people that don't want this to happen, that we're not going to be able to satisfy their questions or overcome their objections. But in my mind, this is a very appropriate for this area. It has some great commercial potential out there for private enterprise, for business to come in and make a profit and provide jobs for people and to provide services to those people who live out there, so they don't have to drive as far, which has less impact on the roadway system and reduces traffic in a certain way. So I'm satisfied that we have a good project here, and that the, what do you call those, the bumpers, the borders, the sideboards are sufficient to make sure that this will occur as has been presented by the developers out here.
Yes.
I'm looking at the letters that have been received from the applicants, and you referenced it already. In the last hearing, when we were talking, these are the people, these are well-educated people, these are people that come here to have a quality in the way of life, and I enjoyed them as people, and they presented good arguments. I'm looking at what they submitted as development conditions, it's Exhibit 69, and so I think some of the questions, if we try to help answer that in the discussion, I agree, Commissioner Dale, it's been a good discussion that's tried to answer and overcome. So we are going to try, in the best of our ability, to answer. Well, I don't know that we can anticipate everything in that. To ensure that the quality of the development is in keeping with the standard of other nearby developments. I see from the people in the audience that this, in terms of density, is lower than what they're living in. So it would maintain that rural feel, and that, I guess, the size of a lot helps dictate the size of the building and maybe the quality of construction, hopefully. The traffic component that you referenced earlier, if city services get to this, it will be a much higher density. They can't afford to build anything less than 3 or 4 lots per acre. Commissioner Dale, your comment that the commercial portion of this is appropriate to buffer down traffic along Highway 55, if it's done in an organized way that doesn't contraindicate the quality of life that people want out there. So I think that if we look at their conditions, approved stormwater runoff, that will be in there. They'll have a capture basin. They want the park, I don't know if that's in this development. They're close to an amenity, which is the lake within walking distance. The turn lanes we've decided would be determined, and I'm not a traffic engineer, so I have to trust that what's been provided today streetlights are a city function if they choose to put that in at the plus, but you don't get both. I've asked before myself on development that I was opposed to, if you could have a contingency fund to account for the acts of God that happen or things like that. And that's never been approved, even in the arguments that I tried to make for it. And the all containment testing of select cells. And the question I would ask is if they were required to pay for that when their development went in tonight. Probably not. I don't know. I'm just talking out loud. Approval, I'm looking at 14 of the development homeowner shall be required for any commercial installation in the new development. And I'm not sure what that means. I know that if they put something in that's similar to legacy school, it's a fun place to go. And if you're driving out there around the lake and you want to stop for snacks, that's going to service more than the homeowners in that area. So to put the burden of the commercial development on the residents for that would not be reasonable in my mind. I agree that weed mitigation on unsold lots has to be maintained. That's in the development agreement. Homeowners associations administer. I don't know, I know that HOAs are not enforced by the county. They're a part of something else that's not in our jurisdiction. And then they want to have accessibility via telephone. I'm not sure that's all in sports jurisdiction. I don't know. I'm street sidewalks, street lights, interesting, stress. That again, I think you've covered in good detail. Version, I appreciate that. I don't know if he's got a requirement for local improvements that are required by the developers. I don't. Do you have any comments on that?
Because I don't see a need for one.
Okay, so no need. As practice for the development uses timely state failure to meet any of the above requirements shall constitute grounds for immediate retraction of the approval and decisions of the approval. So it sounds to me like, given that there's a serious stipulation and the amount that they have to prove out, that this would happen.
It's covered in the actual development agreement, any termination or failure to perform. Versus zoning.
Okay. That's pretty, yeah, it goes back, and then you got to start all over. Yeah.
Madam Chair, I wanted to put that on our list. What are your thoughts?
Well, I feel that in the last hearing we had before we went to deliberation, that there was a sentiment of the people that were in opposition. The 1.25 acres, they liked that idea over the density that would come if they want, because it was wait for the city to annex it or something like that. So I have no problem with the residential outline of this. I think they're going to be beautiful homes with, some of them are going to have magnificent views, and it's just going to be something that whole area, it's going to, it'll improve all of them. And I don't know, you hate to say the values of their homes will go up because that, you know, people don't want the value.
They don't want that
They're
right
going up
now.
so high right now, they want them to go down. But anyway, just that their concern was the commercial, and we have talked this commercial through to where it is, it's restricted. They're not going to run amok out there and just throw in, you know, they're not going to have bars and taverns. It's going to have to be approved for before they can get their permits. It's going to have, they're restricted in some respects by by our matrix, first of all. But that's why I said it, and I'm going to say it again. If we don't approve the commercial right now, we approve all the residential, is it a deal breaker on moving forward with development? And that's just kind of, and that is because all of the infrastructure and everything like that stuff is expensive. And when you read on this list of what everybody wants, this is cost prohibitive when they want sidewalks and street lights and this and that and everything else. It's cost prohibitive. I mean, it's just that it doesn't work that way. And so then they'd have all these beautiful homes and nobody would be able to afford them because of.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I would say regarding your idea to not change the commercial designation, it's already designated as commercial out there, 90 acres of it.
Right.
And that we would have a hard time to say you can't do that. We're actually reducing the impact of commercial out there.
No, we didn't. They did. They reduced it by 2/3.
Well, but I'm saying what I'm saying, if we approve this action, we're actually reducing the impact of the potential impact of commercial out there to 1/3 of what it was. You've already pointed that out, and already we know that 30% of that 10 acres of it has already been purchased by a commercial entity that wants to put a very nice facility out there. So I think our action here today should include the reduction of the 90 commercial acres down to the 30, and include that as part of this whole deal. I think it's commensurate. It's part of the whole deal. The commercial up there makes the residential more doable, more realistic. It makes it more attractive for people to live there, to know, hey, I've got a place I can go right here to get my needs for my yard and for my all that kind of stuff. I just go down the street about 1 mile to D&B Supply and get everything I need for my yard, and that's really attractive. I really like that, and I think that's part of the whole deal. I would feel uncomfortable with approving this piecemeal. I think that the concept that we have, the total package, is workable and it's good.
And Commissioner Gale, I appreciate that. I believe that this is the Kmart Blue Light Special. It all goes together. So I have a question. Will this project...
What did you say? I'm sorry.
It's a Kmart Blue Light Special. You have to be old enough to know what's in Kmart. Anyway, Raymond doesn't like it. Is this going to be a quality project? Will the building development on this quality project?
Yes, we know that. We know that. That's been determined.
We've had other applications for the county. And, one of the issues with commercial, in fact, we don't have design, getting to the issue of compatibility. Considering the proximity of this commercial and where the comments came from is that it's just up higher. And so things that might mitigate visual impacts would be things that we said, conditions of shielding lights, of screening any loading areas or solid waste enclosures, that those be screened so people aren't in their house looking at the backside of a business. That can be
Mitigated.
those things could be mitigated. I don't think they're in there now, but we could things like that to show some space. So we get
Aesthetics.
quality development, but some of those details can make a big difference.
Yes.
Mitigating.
And Trish, do we need to put them in? Is that what you're saying, that we need to add
Yeah,
them?
we could. I mean, if you feel that would mitigate, I think a lot of it
Yeah.
standard practice now is
Right.
easy
Sure.
to achieve.
And there again, that would involve a negotiation with the developer to say, do you agree to these conditions, and how can you mitigate for the aesthetics that we're looking for here, or that people will be looking for? And I think that can be included in the development agreement.
So I'm just offering that up. That's something that
Thank
can
you.
help with compatibility.
Thank you.
And I like that too. I do. So, so Madam Chair, it's been almost an hour and a half of deliberation, and I know that there's a great effort to make sure that we're compatible. Conflict on land use decisions that are not compatible is very difficult for people going forward. So if the opposition, and I hear them, and I voted this no in the first round, but if we had left that as prime agricultural farm ground, they wouldn't be living there. And because that development has built out to where it is, and because I would like quality development, and I've been assured by every head nodder in this audience, and this is a beautiful area. We want to protect it. We protected an area yesterday that deserves that. And so on the basis of the assurance that we will not harm our natural resource, that the traffic will be mitigated for, that the neighboring properties who enjoy that will have something that's commensurate with that on the same side of the street, and basically cut that enclave portion of farming. I am for ag ground, but it is getting increasingly difficult to move that equipment, even with that stoplight there. And I believe the board should take a look at our comp plan and preserving that on the north side of 55 for those farmers that run that equipment there. That is still very heavily ag. But this enclave piece basically is what it is. It gets increasingly problematic, and we had an approval on it, so I feel good from my position as a District 1 Commissioner and looking at the planning and zoning recommendations that we could sit with the planning and zoning commissioners and go point to point and say, here's how we mitigated, here's how we overcame, here's how we're going to compensate for in the best interest of the existing homeowners, in the best interest of the landowners, and
Madam Chair, I'm going to move forward with a motion here. I will move that we authorize the board to sign, well, we don't have a development agreement, so we won't sign that. That'll come at a later time. We want to have a discussion regarding the,
Give us some direction.
give us some direct, and some of the direction would be to talk about the mitigating factors for aesthetics. And I think leave it at that, and then you can work with that. The other thing I will continue on with, yeah, do you have?
Maybe have Zach, some advice.
Okay.
If we do a motion on the comp plan separately first, that's preferable.
Right, I mean, that's the general preferred order.
Okay.
Vote on the comprehensive plan, then vote on the rezone, and then including in that rezone, the conditions of the development agreement. And we'll prepare the documents and bring those back for you at a later date, but you can vote on the substance of them today and sign it later.
So I'll make a motion then. I'll start with one. Somebody else can follow up. I will make a motion that we authorize the board to sign the comprehensive plan map amendment as requested.
Mr. Chair, that's on the last page, is to change the designation of approximately 44.9 acres from commercial to residential designation and approximately 45.9 acres from agricultural to residential portions of R32915, R3291711, and all of R3291710.
Is that your second?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
It has been moved and seconded that we grant the request for a comprehensive map amendment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we authorize the board to approve the conditional rezone with a development agreement, sign the findings of fact and conclusions of law and order, and that is to follow. Zach, how do we want to state that the development agreement needs to be finalized?
Well, you have a draft development agreement,
Right.
Exhibit 78B, and so this would be a good time to, it'll come back and it'll be signed before it's comes to the board, before signature will be signed by the property owners. But you should make sure that right now you're voting on what the substance of that development agreement is.
Right.
So you have a draft 78B that has the terms laid out. Should make sure you've got that complete before you
So
vote.
we can't hold on the motion until we
Well,
figure that out.
I just discussed the development agreement. The conditions that are listed here have already been approved at one point and accepted by the property only. The only thing we're talking about different is to put in some of the conditions that Tricia was talking about as far as screening for solid waste collection points and the type of lighting for the commercial, as far as downdraft light, screen lighting, and those kinds of things. We've done this in several other instances. It's pretty easy to put that in there. So that's the kind of direction that I think
Yeah.
that I was hearing you wanted.
And do we need to do that now, Zach? Do you want that articulated now for the development agreement?
Articulated, and then staff can finalize
Okay.
the development.
Okay.
So Trish, would you read back what you have in addition to 78B that the board will be approving?
We'll just add some directions, to add conditions requiring
And,
shielding of outdoor lighting and then screening of any outdoor storage and solid waste.
right. And that's sufficient? Those 2 points are sufficient?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that will, and there is we don't have a design review committee.
Right.
So,
So when that would come in, that the building department would review it against the development agreement.
okay, thank you.
All right. So, Madam Chair, now I'll try it again. Make the motion that we authorize the board to approve the rezone, the conditional rezone. This is case number OR 2018-0004 and 2018-0002, including a development agreement that is already been identified with these points, as well as the addition of language to require that the screened lighting as well as screened for solid waste, and that language will be developed by our attorneys.
Second.
Moved and seconded to grant the conditional rezone. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Then I believe we need a motion to sign the findings, facts, conclusions of law and resolution and ordinance. Is that correct?
And if we could set that for a date certain to prepare everything.
Okay.
I think with the development agreement and the findings, we'll probably need about 3 weeks.
Okay. So we don't need to do that today then?
No, just to
Okay.
set a date to.
Okay.
About August 26th at 9 a.m.?
Yeah. Is that a public hearing
No,
Budget,
not a public
no?
hearing.
Budget
I
is
mean
that
budget.
night. Yeah, that night.
that night?
At night.
Yeah,
Not at 9 a.m. though.
not a
Not
public.
at 9 a.m.,
5 p.m.
5 p.m.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do it at 11.
Okay, that's good. Anything else? That would conclude this meeting. Thank you, all of you that took the time to join us through WebEx, took the time to be here today. We appreciate your input, and thank you very, very much. Conclude this meeting.